The name orbital sander mostly reminds people of that handy sanding equipment. Just so you know, there is another sort of orbital sander designed to be used on hardwood floors. They can accommodate unusually coarse grit sandpapers that scape through these kinds of floors. So, what exactly does this kind of orbital sander have to offer? What makes it different from other sanders for this purpose? When should you consider using this orbital sander? This and a host of other questions will be answered in various segments of this video. Especially if you want to know how to sand hardwood floors with the orbital sander, you should hang on. The popular orbital sander has a work surface that is too small for large working areas. The handy design of the average orbital sanders when used on the floor can be a very tedious process. Bearing this in mind, there are varieties of orbital sanders designed to cater to this need. These types of sander allow you to work from an upright position as you can conveniently use features such as the safety button. This sort of orbital sander has a very large sanding pad. The sanding pads are way larger than the handy orbital sander. In the same vein, they have large sandpaper grit designed to work with these sanding pads. We have enunciated some of the differences between these machines. However, are there any similarities between the two equipment? Of course, there are a couple of similarities. First, the pattern of sanding wood surfaces is the same for both. They do a critical job of not allowing loose ends. For instance, as a result of the orbital working feature, you do not have to follow grain patterns while working. For other sanding machines such as the edger or drum sander, this might become a problem. The grain patterns will leave an awkward look of a sanding procedure done in the wrong manner. However, the orbital sander takes care of this loose end. This machine ensures there are no signs of the sanding pattern. The orbital effect sees to this. Haven shed light on some of the differences. When do you need the orbital sander's services on the hardwood floor? Hardwood orbital sanders are important tools for sanding hardwood floors. However, their suitability is dependent on a couple of factors. Firstly, what kind of wood floor are you dealing with? Secondly, what is your purpose for sanding? These among other factors should inform if you will need the orbital sander. Aside from the condition of the wood, the intent for sanding a wood floor also determines the machine used. If you simply require a change of the top coat, you will likely carry out a process called wood screening. This implies that you are not reaching into the stain of the wood. As a result, you need a mild or less aggressive sander. In a bid to achieve that, the orbit inclined sander is the best option. This is because the drum sander will reach beyond the desired part of the wood. Haven mentioned the drum sander. Let's talk about other wood floor sanding machines. We like to think there are three very important sanding machines for wood floors. These machines tag along at various points and the orbital sander is an integral part of them. The three essential sanding equipment are the drum sander, the edger, and the orbital sander. Nonetheless, we strongly recommend hand sanding as the last step for certain parts of the wood floor. This is because even the edger cannot reach some places. For instance, places very close to the walls may be off reach. You should hand sand such places to align with the other sanded portions of the floor. How do you use orbital sanders to sand hardwood floors? As with any other kinds of sanders, there are appropriate ways to use this type of floor sander while sanding a floor. Below are some of the tips for using the orbit inclined floor sanders. Also, we will discuss precautionary measures to be observed. 1. Prepare the needed sandpaper. Depending on the type and state of the hardwood floor, you will need a variety of sandpaper grit when using the orbital sander. In light of this, purchase the required types of sandpaper grit well ahead of time. This will save you the disappointment of not getting the sandpaper when you are in actual need of them. You should even buy extra and slightly exceeding grit sandpapers. This will be used if you need them at any point. 2. Check out for loose ends. Check out for cracks and openings on the wood floor. You should fill the cracks with good wood putty. Generally, ensure the wood is in the right state before sanding commences. 3. Install the sandpaper. Usually, the sandpaper is attached to a Velcro sanding pad. When you attach them with the abrasive surface facing outward, the sandpaper stick firmly. To fix the sandpaper, start by turning the machine on its back. This will enable you to see through properly. Afterward, install the sanding pad by pushing it into the face of the sanding disc. These pads mostly come in white and red colors. However, the colors do not matter. Next, after selecting the appropriate sandpaper grit, remove the backing from the sandpaper. Very important while attaching to the Velcro sanding pad, the abrasive surface of the sandpaper faces the floor. Sanding with this machine or even the drum sander isn't a spontaneous activity. It is a deliberate act with a couple of techniques. You are to sand the wood surface a couple of times as against once. At least you should make passes on the floor with 3 kinds of sandpaper. You should kick off the process with a very coarse sandpaper grit. Something around 40 or slightly less should be alright. However, this is dependent on the nature of the job and floor in question. If you simply need to refinish, you do not have to use something that coarse. The same applies when you need to change the outer coat of the wood. We like to divide the sanding procedure into 3 stages. We have the initial sanding, sanding midway, and final sanding. As stated earlier, this does not in any way limit the amount of grit used to 3. You can use more or less depending on the project at hand. For the midway sanding, proceed to a 60 to 70 grit. Ensure that the switch of sandpaper grit is warranted. Do not be in a hurry to switch the sandpaper until it has performed to your expectations. Eventually, the ultimate sanding should use a grit size of around 90 and above. Something around that should help you get the smooth finish desired. 4. Dust retention system. The dust retention system is usually made up of a dust bag. This dust bag is big and allows a large amount of dust and wood scrap into it. Before use, make sure the dust bag is empty and in the right shape. When you sand, do not allow any more than half the size of the bag to be filled with dust. This ensures that the bag remains in the proper condition. Furthermore, it enables the dust retention system to work without complications when trapping the dust. The dust bag can be emptied by unzipping the base of the bag or anywhere it is placed. Furthermore, you can choose to use this machine with a vacuum cleaner. This provision is more effective because of the amount of dust it can retain. 5. Electricity. Except on rare occasions, floor-inclined orbital sanders available are wired ones. This implies that they must be connected to a power source. Plug the machine into the power source, preferably on the wall outlet. Next, release the outlet as this will make the equipment as comfortable as possible. While doing this, hold the safety switch. When you are ready, release the safety switch to start sanding the floor. 6. Dealing with the dust properly. The dust bags are pretty impressive. They do a great job trapping dust and some wood scraps. However, there are limits to what they can do. This is considering how much dust and wood extract the machine churns out. This is usually a large amount and the dust retention mechanism cannot trap all. So, what should you do? Use a vacuum to clean up the sanded floor after a couple of passes. You can do this after changing the sandpaper grit. This will ensure that the sanding procedure is not interrupted by dust particles and scraped wood. So, if you use 3 kinds of sandpaper grit, you should clean the floor at least 3 times. 7. Protect your eye. There is one thing every woodworker and client has in common. That is the desire for a good job. However, you shouldn't put yourself on the line which achieving that. You should ensure that you are protected health-wise. You need to use eye protection. To a reasonable extent, this will protect your eye from flying dust particles and wood extracts. 8. Breathe clean air. Even when refinishing hardwood floors, you are exposed to a lot of dust. To breathe safe air, you should use a respirator or nose mask at least. This will ensure you do not breathe in unhealthy substances. 9. Protect your ears. There are sounds beyond a certain decibel that is harmful to the human ears. The side effects start gradually as workers do not notice on time. Considering this, do not take the use of ear protectors for granted. 10. Protect your knee. As a result of the working position, you might need to do things on the floor. Therefore, you should protect your knees. There are products solely designed for this purpose. Do not leave your safety to chance as you use this item. It could also be the saving grace in cases of a protruding nail that was unnoticed. Conclusively, this orbital sander has a milder approach to sanding hardwood floors. On that note, it may be used for hardwood floors with very thin wear layers. Because of its orbital feature, you do not need to worry about the likely slight scratches as with other types of sanders. Also, it may be used to screen hardwood floors, as well as for refinishing hardwood flooring. The precautions and tips shared in this video must be put to use whenever you use this equipment. If you've enjoyed this video, click the subscribe button below and hit the notification bell so you'll know once we post a new video. Also, drop a comment below so we can know your thoughts. Finally, don't forget to check the description below for more details and visit our site www.zimsanders.com for more awesome sander and sanding content like this.